Thank you, Madame Rajavi, members of the PMOY, NCRI, MEK, and the 52 victims of the atrocities recently perpetrated at Camp Ashraf, and the 7 that we know are currently in the hands of the secret police somewhere in Baghdad. God bless you. I want to take a minute and talk about Camp Ashraf, because I just want to touch on the humanity of the people at Camp Ashraf. I knew a number of them and spent a little less than a year there. A good friend of mine was the commander who relieved me at Camp Ashraf. He was supposed to be here today and had some travel difficulties. Colonel Chris Wilson, and I convey his condolences to all of you, as well as the condolences of Colonel Dan McElroy, another commander of Camp Ashraf. So I think most of us, that is the former commanders up there, are on the same sheet of music. In 2003, I was the first military police officer to show up at Camp Ashraf, and we were trying to understand our role. We had legal orders. The Mujahideen were on the foreign terrorist list, and we were told that they were terrorists, and we were there to, we thought, imprison them. And so my boss at the time, General Odierno, went down there and was told, well, we can't surrender because we're not at war with you. Well, it's difficult to argue that point, because you see, no American had been harmed by the Mujahideen. No American that we're aware of had even been shot at by the Mujahideen, even though he had bombed several of their camps, killed and injured several of them in the early phases of the war. So in the course of trying to develop this policy, I spent a lot of time running back and forth between Ashraf and Baghdad, to include eventually talking directly to Lieutenant General Ricardo Sanchez, who was the commander of all military forces in Iraq at the time. So General Sanchez had some ideas about what he wanted to have done, and it was my job to try to convey to him the reality of his decisions. And I said, General, you need to come up and see Camp Ashraf for yourself. So eventually he did so. Well, on the day that he arrived, he flew into my headquarters, which was actually right inside Camp Ashraf, 40 square kilometers, roughly, the grounds of the camp, huge place. And he choppered in, he and his entourage, they all disembarked, and they all had all of their combat gear, their weapons, everything. And I greeted him. I was wearing my my desert uniform. And he said, well, where's your protective equipment? I said, General, welcome to the safest place in Iraq. But I don't think he quite believed me. Anyway, we were going to take him on a tour, because, as I said, it's 40 square kilometers. It's a huge place. And so we both climb into a armored Humvee, and we had a large security detail as befits his status. And we go driving down the main road in the middle of Ashraf, which is a broad boulevard, as you've seen in some of the pictures. So really, it had to be seen to be believed. It's when you get more than a kilometer from the rivers in Diyala province, it's just dirt, hot, baked dirt there. And which is why the region's crisscrossed with irrigation ditches, etc. And this camp is a city, really. Camp, for us, I don't know about you, but when I think about camp, I went there as a scout or something like that. But this is really a small city. And it had power plants, a radio station, gardens, a museum. It had a Pepsi plant, bakeries, all of these things. And it was all built out of the desert by the patience and determination of some people who had a vision for something greater than themselves. So to the earlier point, it was much more than a camp, it was an idea. And that idea, we think, is a free and democratic Iran. So I have a couple of comments. First, we've heard recapped in the very beginning by Ms. Sansami and obviously our other distinguished speakers about America's promises. I feel these acutely because as the military leader in 2003, I was the U.S. government's agent for the disarmament of the Mujahideen. And my friend Chris Wilson, whom I mentioned, personally handed at least one of the people on this poster his ID card guaranteeing his protected persons status. And so for us, of course, we, as professional military police officers, we understand the Geneva Convention. And we understood that they had a protected person status and that status continued. And in theory, that status continues regardless of whether you maintain physical control over a prisoner or not. And so we can't freely give somebody within our control to somebody else if we have reason to believe that their safety, security, health, welfare will be compromised. So I kind of have to me, what has happened with the Mujahideen is like a much worse form of rendition than any we saw under the Bush administration. Because we're talking about over 3,000 people. We're talking about people who we knew had not committed any crime, nor even any act of aggression against the United States. And how do we know that? We know that because the FBI said so. And yet we turned them over to the government of Iraq. And so now we have, I think, 5 separate attacks that have occurred against the Mujahideen people that we guaranteed to protect. And the government of Iraq is the guarantor of their safety and security. It's simply, as Wes said and others, simply unbelievable that the government of Iraq is serious about the safety and security of the Mujahideen. It's simply unbelievable that Iraqi security forces at that camp knew nothing during the 4 hours in which, as we saw at the start of this meeting, there was protracted gunfire, measured gunfire over an extended period of time, while the men and women behind me were shot and then subsequently executed. And then the equipment was destroyed. It's unbelievable, the explanation. So similarly, I would say that it is unbelievable that we would expect the government of Iraq to conduct an investigation of this that had any meaning, any integrity whatsoever. The fact that 7 of these people are now unarmed and in the hands of these people in Baghdad as we sit here is unbelievable to me. Because, I spent two years in Iraq. I was there in 03, 05, 06, a little bit of 07, on and off. We know what these people do. And 7 of our friends are in their custody right now. I pray that we will act with honor and integrity and protect these people. Because in the end, who will protect the innocent if not we? And I share this with the people behind me on the wall. And that is, I know what it's like to be in harm's way and to commit your life. And I can tell you, going back into Iraq in 2005 and 2006 when the beheadings were going on, etc., you knew that in the end you could die. So what is left? And for me, that's my faith. They can take everything from me, including my head from my shoulders, but will never take my faith in God away. And for the Ashrafis, they have one thing more, and that is their commitment to a free, democratic, a new Iran. I think it's fitting that if you look at the poster, you see the universe behind the victims of Ashraf. Because you see many of the stars depicted there long ago ceased to exist. But the light traveling through space keeps their presence in the universe. And so it is with the 52 on that wall, and the many others that populate the Book of Martyrs and that have died for the sake of Iran. They still exist, and their light still shines in this world. And so my prayer today is that America, that we will live to see a free, democratic Iran, that we will fulfill our promise to act quickly and secure the over 3,000 people that we promised to protect at Camp Liberty, that we will act without ceasing to free the 7 that are currently being held, and that we will accept not a government of Iraq investigation, but an international investigation that leads one day to the International Criminal Court, and that the people who morally will suffer for eternity for the deeds that they did on that black day a week ago will live to face their day in court also. Thank you very much.